Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BetSperts.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. Andy, July is mercifully almost over. It's been a very, very, very sports-free couple of weeks for me. Sports betting-free couple of weeks for me. I'll be damned if I can find an edge in Women's World Cup. These results just feel
I was so excited for it.
Random generator is spitting out these numbers.
The time just sucks.
Yeah. I check it every morning. I'm like, okay, that happened, and then move on. Hopefully, the U.S. women don't lose to Portugal tonight. I would hate to be out this early.
With some tennis and obviously like AFL, and there's some things I don't mind. Like, hey, I'm just tailing somebody on this.
Sure.
I just want to wake up and find out if it won. I'm going to set flash score. And first thing you do is you open flash score and you get that morning fog and you say, like, which team did I bet?
What did I have again?
Like, all right, did they win by enough or did they not lose? You know, and then you after like 10 seconds, you realize, I should just open my sportsbook and see how the money is.
Yeah.
But no, like, I really do enjoy watching international soccer. Maybe my favorite. I like that more than any club soccer.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's like a hot take. Like,
no,
World Cup is popular.
I mean, we're not like club soccer people. So I mean,
no, I'm just not club soccer people. You're right, but like that's what's killed it for me because man, the Euros are in the morning. I love that, having a couple matches every morning, and when the World Cup is in the right spots, the timing is great. It just kind of sucks. So yeah, no, I'm glad it's football. We have the Hall of Fame game this Thursday. I think we'll probably touch on that a little on the Wednesday pod, just give it a little love. But I mean, it's the shittiest of the preseason games.
Yeah, I have. I hope you enjoyed the 3M. I'm, thankful that golf is pretty much over for the year. I did not.
Yeah, the playoffs suck.
I spent most of my time this last week watching sports. I was watching something I couldn't even bet on, which was World Championships of swimming. That ended up
Miss
being
Ledecky.
freaking awesome. Ledecky in the 800, man. Boy, she dropped the hammer on Titmus. Titmus wasn't even within. I don't even think she got second. She got third. That was a shocker because Titmus was kind of pointing at that race and was going to try to make a run at her, and she just was not close. I think Ledecky still has the 30, 31, 32 fastest times ever in the 800 free, which is amazing. Titmus was incredible in the 400 free, where she set a world record. Looks like she had something in the tank still. But overall, World Swimmings was great. And it was great to kind of get the juices going before the Olympics next year, kind of get a sense of where everybody stands. America, the gap between Australia and America has closed, and then actually we've been passed. It wasn't a 1 year hiccup in Tokyo. The Australian national team is sick. And they just wiped the floor with us in terms of gold medals. Ultimately, we got a lot of silvers. Whoop-de-doo. They beat the pants off of us in the relays. China is going to be a factor in Paris, which I was not expecting. They have a couple of fast, candidates for some golds. France was one of the cooler stories of women swimming worlds. Won gold in the 2 fly, 2 IM, 4 IM. All the same guy, Leon Marchand, and he's going to be the hero of France in France. But it was a great worlds. Canada and US got better as the meet went on, which I think maybe was like a little bit of a time zone effect potentially. So I think it's going to be decision time about whether to fade Australia and their swimmers in Paris, because that's used to be how it always was.
We have about 362 days. It's about a year away, but it is interesting to get a good kind of bearing on where people are.
This is a long way to tell a story that Andy, we need football to start. It needs to come,
and we do.
Soon.
We have the Hall of Fame game this week.
Big news last week.
Next Thursday, Friday through the weekend. Like, I'm excited to watch some of that. I've been taking to, and we do some research for these, and mostly reading and some podcasts while I'm out doing stuff or walking or just on the drive in. You listen to some other people's podcasts, see what their takes are, because every once in a while there's like, oh, I hadn't thought of that and I like that. But I have taken to watching a lot of like those, not even like game, condensed games. It's like the Giants Titans. It was just the ending of that one from week 1 last year. Like I watched it was like a 20-minute YouTube video that I spent I didn't fast forward very much. I've watched a bunch of those. I do enjoy some of the film breakdown stuff.
Well, that one game was crazy, and we'll save that for talking about the Giants. But the Giants had some wild wins early in the season last year. That was one of them because they went for 2 at the end of the game to win, right?
Which one?
The Giants Titans one you just mentioned. I think they went for 2 to win.
And then there was a missed field goal.
Missed field goal that would have won it for the Titans. Right. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, we need the preseason to get here. The camp news is, other than the Burrow scare, and the Jalen Ramsey out till December. Tough. If you had any kind of enthusiasm for the Dolphins challenging the Bills, that kind of threw cold water on that for me, because now their defense goes down to middle of the pack from an outstanding unit on paper. Their DBs go down to 20th, which is not great considering how many amazing quarterbacks are on their schedule. Other than that, we've also solved that it looks like the Desmond Ridder experience will not work out. Period. There were several clips circulated. Andy, I don't know if you saw, but he doesn't have it. We've decided based on July clips. So I'm saying
it is fun. The July clip thing deserves a little bit of shine too. Before we get into the Commanders preview, it is either like whatever the storyline needs to be is usually like, hey, here's our highly drafted rookie. Look at him catch this ball. It's like, wow, there wasn't even really a safety there, and the cornerback was a coach. It's like, good for him. And, granted, these guys are, high-level athletes, and a lot of them will have very good years, but it's like, are we really making big leaps off a lot of this? Like, we hope this guy's good, but we shouldn't be using this clip.
Yeah.
A lot of my favorite things to read are from negative camp reports, when they actually do get a little real. Hasn't been great out of Chicago camp. There's been a few. Courtney Cronin, I think she used to be a Vikings reporter. Actually, she's down in Chicago. She was pretty not excited about the offense for the Bears, how they looked. My favorite one is, though, whenever the guy has a bad session, especially like a quarterback. And I do have a conspiracy theory, and usually this is Drew's department. But before we get into anything, one conspiracy theory for me is when they say, like, all right, we're going to run one last play. It's like, does the defensive coach just kind of tell his guys to dog it? Because how many reports do you say, like, let's just say Rodgers was like 3 for 12, but he did throw a really nice touchdown on the last play of the. It's always like the last play is like, hey, he threw a long bomb to Watkins, and then we had a nice touchdown, and that was a great way to close the day. That is my conspiracy theory, that they just let those, because you don't want to send your court.
No,
and it's probably the right thing to do. Like, your defense, if they know, hey, we dogged it on there, like, you don't want to send your quarterback into the tunnel having a bad day. He needs a little bit of a break.
Yeah, I think I don't think it's a conspiracy theory, because I think I don't know that the offense is. I don't know if the guy who's responsible for calling it. He's not like, okay, this is the last play. He's like ready to call it, waiting for
good one. That's the other part of it. Like, all right, we're done.
Yeah, that's it. Yep, let's walk off. That's a walk off. No, okay. So
it's like my kids. They get
that was a good
one more until I do it.
That was a good segue, though, to talking some commies, because the 2022 commies camp buzz was bad. It was a lot of. What's the plan here? We're really gonna run Wentz out here and think that we're gonna compete. Like, where's Chase Young? What's this team they look out of sorts. Doesn't look like the offensive coordinator and the head coach don't seem to be getting along. The defensive coordinators on QAnon sites and 4chan doing weird shit. Like, it was just a general black cloud over a franchise that had a problem. And that was that it had cancer at the very top of the highest order. And if we're going to kind of point out, deltas among, franchises going from 2022 to 2023, I think commies breathing a little fresh air because Dan Snyder is gone. And he was an absolute stain on the entire NFL. I don't think that there is much you can say positive that he brought to the sport. Probably one of the worst owners we've had in professional sports in a while. I'm sure there are others that did more terrible things, but he was
it's
not
the
a
Sterlings
good
and the Shots of the world. Like his name will
probably Sterling. Probably the last.
Donald Sterling. If we had to do quick Mount Rushmore of this, Donald Sterling, Marge Schott.
Yeah. This is the Dan Snyder. He's on the Mount Rushmore with those guys.
I don't know who somebody in the chat's gonna have to come up with a fourth bad owner. Marge Schott is number one. Yeah, some of her sound bites are really rough.
She was something.
She was loud about it. So someone will have to come up with one there. But that is a huge plus. I don't think you just see like dividends instantly, but there has to be, we joked about this a little bit with the Patriots. Like, hey, all things being the same, if I'm Nuke, maybe I don't want to go where Bill O'Brien is if the two contracts are the same. And I think the teams are about even for as far as how they could fare this year. That has to happen at some point where they're doing coaching searches, even at the lower levels. Like I'm trying to find a tight ends coach or an offensive assistant here. Like, well, I don't want to go work there. And it's crazy how many coaches came from that Shanahan tree early in his tenure, because there's a lot of good coaches that came out of that tree. And then you just wonder if they've had all the way into the scouting department, if people have been like, hey, I have 2 job offers, I'm just going to choose not Washington. So there might be some benefits down the road to
for sure
the kind of people they can bring in to turn this around. It's been a while. It's crazy. They made the playoffs 2 years ago. I forgot it was the 7-9 division winners.
That's right.
Honestly, when I thought about this team at first glance, and if you'd have quizzed me and said winning season, losing season, I would have been very sure they had a losing season before I looked at the standings again. I started to dig into this. I'm like, holy shit, they were 8-1. It was it had been a long time. I think it's 15 years since the cellar dweller in any division has had a 500 record or better. And they had a lot of weird games, but they had a lot of nice things going for them. It was just missing, a few links here and there. And it's like, you have 4 really good defensive pass rushers. You're just a really good front 4, little iffy in the coverage unit. It's like, hey, man, you have a lot of good skill position players. And then this is your quarterback that you're going to go with. And then, of course, obviously the offensive line probably, I don't know where you had them last year. Bottom 5 for me. I'm guessing most rating systems would have it bottom 5. So it's
bottom 10 for me.
Real feast or famine as far as positional groups last year. And that's how you get kind of wonky results or middling results at best. And I kind of want to give them credit. I feel like maybe, and this could all be bullshit, and this is just, more results than what they were actually going for. But they ran the ball so much because they had quarterbacks who turned the ball over. And they didn't have high efficiency plays. They didn't have a high success rate, but they were middling enough, and their defense played well enough that it just kept them in games. And it goes back to that old, that analytics kind of thought exercise of, hey, you're the worst team in the NBA. You're playing the 2018 Warriors or whatever. Would you rather play them for 48 minutes, or would you rather play them first team to score a basket wins?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same kind of thing. They kept themselves in all these games by playing, just kind of middling football. And they were in a lot of close games late, and they ran the ball a lot. And again, they weren't efficient or good at it. They ran the ball and played defense, and it kept them in games somehow. And when they ran into a really good team, sometimes they'd get the shit kicked out of them.
Yeah. You know what the answer is, right? They played an easy schedule. This was an easy schedule of opposing quarterbacks. And actually, this is an important thing to keep in mind, not just for this preview, but for 3 of the 4 previews we're going to do this week. Because other than the Cowboys, the NFC East did not play good quarterbacks last year. They drew very, very positive opponents in terms of quarterback strength across the NFL, and that allowed them to have portions of their season where they had success. It was a wild dichotomy of team performance under Taylor Heineke versus Carson Wentz. Kind of funny that it broke this way, but let's see. Carson Wentz was 2-5 as a starter in 7 games, I believe. And Taylor Heineke was 5-3-1. So the middle portion of the season where the Commanders were finding success was under the powers of Taylor Heineke. But again, this came against Chicago, Green Bay, Indy, Houston, Atlanta. They tied the Giants. They beat the Jaguars early in the season. And, the one standout win on their entire calendar was the Week 10 win against the Philadelphia Eagles, where they stopped the Eagles' winning streak. So the Eagles were undefeated at that point. Monday night game, 10.5-point dogs, and they showed up. That was the game that ended at the funny penalty.
So
Taylor Heineke got hit late, really leaned into it, got the flag, and got up and celebrated getting the penalty.
Extending the drive. And then that was a, if you look at that final score, that did have one of those
had a pitchy woo woo.
Pitchy woo woo to extend that lead out, because it should have been like a 5-point win. There was the pitchy woo woo at the end. But that was a good win, and a weird little nugget. 2 out of the last 3 years now, they've been the team that ended the longest. The final undefeated team. They were the ones that took down. Do you remember this? We talk about fraudulent teams, and we did Minnesota already. But do you remember the 11-0 Steelers?
Yes. Yes.
They were the team that took them out too. And they did show up. The Eagles didn't show up as much. The pass rush was not I don't know. It just didn't look the same as how it looked in the first game, where they really, really limited them, and obviously different quarterback at that time. But they showed up. They got a win, and they were plucky. They stayed with teams. That was obviously by far the signature win. You look at some of the other ones around that time. It's like, you beat the Colts, you beat the Texans, you beat Atlanta at home. Even the Green Bay win, that was at home, and that was a team that's really struggled to kind of find an identity offensively sometimes during that season. You beat the Bears by 5. Good job.
Oh, that was an ugly game. That was a prime timer too. 12-7. You remember that trash? Oh, good God, that was a bad one. I think ultimately win total was 7.5. You finished with 8 wins. I think they were kind of a buzzy team, or am I thinking of 2 years ago? There was a year where I think last year they were a little on the buzzy side.
They were.
And they finished 4th in their division.
It was a weird buzz because the Eagles buzz was so strong.
Yeah,
there were people that believed in the team basically for the same reasons. Like, hey, there's a really good pass rush to be had here. There's some really good skill position players. Carson Wentz did it once. He can do it again. And obviously the answer to that was he can't. They end up starting. We got Heineke, and then we got some. Was it Howell for the last game then? Yeah,
Howell won the final game against the Cowboys, and that was really only half the starters. It's so. Last year they were a team that had an obvious reason not to buy in on them, which was Carson Wentz, and yet ultimately, I think if he starts all the games, then you're hitting your alt under. Maybe just the stability you had under Heineke was enough to get you a couple of wins against some teams that were playing pretty questionably in the middle of your schedule there. So they go into the offseason for sale, I suppose. It's changing ownership, wonderful, but I think to a degree that handicapped the front office and the decision makers from really making any swings, right? Like the fact that you're coming in here with plan A is Howell But then they signed Jacoby Brissett. A little bit weird to put those two together and say you're 1A and you're 1B in the QB room. They had the space if they wanted. They could have made a move for Lamar Jackson. They definitely. I don't really know how their future dollars are allocated here, but you are paying the least for the quarterback of anyone in the league right now, because you have a guy in year 2 who's a 5th round draft choice who is making next to nothing. And so maybe this wasn't exactly the total perfectly thought out plan, but if it works, then now you have, maybe you push a bunch of chips in the table to fortify certain parts of your roster for next year and try to win something with Sam Howell when he's on a cost control deal. I don't personally think that any of this will work, but it certainly is. It's a strategy. It's a vision, I guess. And I don't really, can't really fault them for, doing this, considering that you had all the uncertainty at the very top of the franchise with the owner being forced out. So, 2022, technically on paper, it was a success, even though you finished 4th in your division. After week 12, you definitely thought maybe we're a wild card adjacent. And then
they weren't eliminated, Drew, until that
down the stretch.
Yeah, the Cleveland game. They were still in that mix. They were in that weird, they were
going to get the last wild card spot.
Yeah, you had that group of teams: the Lions, the Seahawks, the Giants. That whole mess that was sitting there, and I guess nobody was like hopeful because they'd lost to the Lions already. Heading into that Niners game, they were 0-1 or 0-1 versus the Giants. So you have 2 tiebreakers that are lost right away. Like, it wasn't super hopeful, but they were still in it. And obviously the Niners game didn't go very well. That secondary looked pretty rough against them. And then we get back to the Wentz experience a little, and then eliminated versus the Browns in week 17. Mm-hmm. Like you said, play sort of the Cowboys in week 17, get a win to have the 500 record, but there was a lot of coin flips that happened throughout the season.
A lot of coin flips. And you know what else there were a lot
of them.
You know what else there were a lot of, Andy? Unders. This team went under 12 out of the 17 games. The overs included giving up 37 points to the Niners. So apparently your defense and the Jack Del Rio scheme, not great against the Shanahan kind of vision for running offense. The Philly game went flying over, although if we take out the pitchy woo, that might have been closer. Green Bay went over barely. Detroit flew over because they scored 36 points. Otherwise, this was a pretty consistent team that was playing first to 20 wins. First to 20 wins, Andy, against some bad quarterbacks. That gets you 8 wins in today's NFL.
Straight back to what I said about, hey, we don't care if we're not good at running the ball. We're going to continue to run the ball. We're not going to turn it over as much. And I mentioned good defense. The defense as a whole ranked well. Some deficiencies in the secondary, and those probably remain. But they didn't force turnovers either. They were good at kind of grinding teams in between the 20s and not getting a lot of those. I think if you looked at some of those charts of like EPA gained per turnover or EPA per just some of the defensive EPA metrics, it would maybe not match up as well as how they're ranked overall. But they, like I said, they had some good position groups that played really well, and they just didn't get some of that. Despite having the luck in some of those close games, they didn't get the turnover luck. They, obviously had bad luck with the turnovers when they were starting Wentz, and at the same time, they managed to put themselves in this spot where they were in a lot of close games at the end, despite not being a very good team. So I guess probably a little bit of kudos for the 2022 season.
Yeah.
And then now, that the ownership thing is taken care of, we can move on to fixing the team. I'm not sure where the new ownership group lands on the coach at the very top.
Sure.
I haven't heard a lot of quotes on that. Obviously you don't come out. Maybe this guy would. He doesn't seem to be too shy about saying things in public, but you don't come out and be like, yeah, we're probably replacing him next year.
Yeah.
It does feel like that's in the range of possibilities, but the coaching room here is very, very interesting to me because of, you have a lot of experience. Then you bring in a new offensive coordinator that is basically like, I don't know, I consider him like a rookie quarterback, or he's Jordan Love.
Yeah, sure.
It's like, what are we going to get from this guy? And
an unknown quantity. Yeah.
You really feel like, there's some offensive coordinators who, God, I don't want to say, because it's not as if they're not trying, like, oh, I'm not trying my hardest, but he really has to do more than that. Like, he has to put his handprints on this offense. It has to be like, that is, we can see that working. The quarterback play, if it were better, a lot of these schemes, a lot of these systems would work. He knows what he's doing. He just doesn't have all the pieces, because obviously, like, his end goal is for sure head coaching. So,
sure.
do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
Like, his handprints have to be all over the offense.
Yes.
So I'm excited to see what that is, but
yeah,
I think
he has to do. You're saying he has to do things to get him the credit if it works.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And I think if I were doing that, I'd probably start Jacoby Brissett.
Well, that is the weird thing.
Because I'm not patient if I'm that guy.
Yeah, I mean, the front office is, they got to see if this works. If you can make it work with the quarterback spending you have. So as I mentioned, actually right now your quarterback room is not bottom overall in the NFL. That distinction is a tie between the Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts in terms of paying quarterbacks, just because you're giving your backup quarterback some decent money in Jacoby Brissett. But most of your salary is allocated to your D-line. That 30% of the dollars you spend on this team are in the D-line. Commies are kind of right there in the middle of spending in the NFL right now. More spent on defense than offense. Your offensive group that's kind of getting the lion's share of the comp so far is your skill position players, your wide receivers in particular. And yeah, so you kind of have some strengths in some areas where it's not obvious to me that you are going to win long term in the NFL. You got to figure out the quarterback position, and you're going to have to, certainly would rather a situation like Jordan Love finds himself in Green Bay, where he's going to be well protected. Although I think you can say with a little higher confidence that the wide receiver room that Sam Howell has to work with is flat out good. Like, this is a good skill position group, and so that should give them something, on the positive side of things. But let's talk about the D line that you're spending all this money on, because it's an interesting case. You have a lot of first round draft capital invested in this unit, and there are some players who have scooped some hardware, like Chase Young, defensive rookie of the year, who have not performed as well as some of the other guys that are in that room, who you are now in the upcycle of paying, right? But it's a unit overall that is extremely, extremely talented on the front line. Montez Sweat, Daron Payne, Jonathan Allen, and Chase Young. I don't think you're.
It's nickname worthy. It's up there.
Like,
good front fours get nicknames, and it's close to being to that level. And to Birdie's question there, yes, they can tag Chase next year, but tags are based off average salary from the years past. So it's like $20 million to tag him next year, although it's probably what he gets on the open market.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think, from what we've seen so far in terms of production, if you got to pay Montez Sweat, you pay him. If you have to,
it's been more consistent.
Yeah, if you have to let Chase Young go so you can sign some other pieces, or you can kind of, if you feel like you need to make a move at the quarterback position because Sam Howell isn't it and you don't have enough draft capital to go get a quarterback in the draft next year, then Chase Young is an expendable piece, because your best defensive player expected this season is Daron Payne, closely followed by Jonathan Allen. Those are your interior tackles. Montez Sweat is your best pass rusher, and you've gotten really solid production out of a draft pick in Jamin Davis. Has played well at the weak side linebacker. The secondary is really where it kind of gets weird for this team in the way that they've put this roster together, because you got a couple of rookies out there who are starting some important snaps for you in at the cornerback and the nickelback position. I don't have a strong opinion on whether Emmanuel Forbes will work at the NFL level, but again, kind of Sauce Gardners, the Patrick Surtains, those guys are exceptions to the rule. And mostly you see what you got from Derek Stingley last year, where, you know, the game is moving too fast for you as a rookie, and therefore you are somewhat exploitable. The safeties and other cornerbacks on the roster are nothing to write home about. So it is, to me, personnel standpoint wise, it is a good defense, but it is weak enough in the defensive backfield that I have questions about what happens when they go up against elite quarterbacks, which they are doing much more this year.
I was just going to say, you had that great point last year. The secondary was also not good, but the schedule wasn't as tough. They didn't face a ton of elite quarterbacks. They had a lot of respite from that. You know, there was a lot of spots where they didn't have to go up against really good wide receiver rooms, where you look at the schedule this year and, you know, it's not going to be 17 weeks of hell, but there are some spots that are awful rough, and they're awful rough right off the get-go, having, you know, these rookie corners out against, well, I mean, I guess Tim Patrick is injured now and done, but Denver, Buffalo, Philly right in a row after the Cardinals game is going to be pretty testing for these young corners. And I mean, there's stretches down the field too, where you have the Cowboys, Dolphins, Rams, Jets, Niners, Cowboys to end the season.
Yeah.
And you know, that obviously it's a long time from now and a lot of people could be hurt, but it's a lot of good wide receivers in those 5 teams in those 6 weeks.
Yeah.
That's if these young guys, you know, don't turn a corner, you need at least one of them to be like replacement level pretty fucking quick.
Yeah. I think it's fair to have an expectation of Sam Howell this year that he's going to be a bottom 5 quarterback. I mean, this isn't, you know, anything better than that is house money. This is sort of the same deal that Texans had with Davis Mills last year, where you're like, look, we're paying him so little. If this happens to work out, this is franchise altering. So we got to try. That's kind of the read I get. Jacoby Brissett's going to give you a better chance to win a game week in, week out. And at some point, the question is going to be, is there a schism between the defense and the offense, where the pass rush and the elite guys, those guys are well compensated, so they're probably just going to keep their mouths shut. But is it become an issue where, you know, the defense is upset that the offense is giving them more support? Possible. Skill position group, as I mentioned, the wide receivers are good. Definitely a good, just in general, good job drafting and developing that talent. But tight end, huge question mark for the, you know, the roster overall. Running back, not especially, you know, strong. So, you know, it's going to be up to Howell to, you know, score you into the 20s if you want to win games, I think. And I just don't have a ton of confidence that that's going to happen. Overall, considering they be moving past Dan Snyder, and you get a little bit of a, you know, breathing room, and you have some talent on this roster. Actually, I didn't really go through who they lost, who they added. Let me do that real quick. Added Jacoby Brissett, fine, but I don't really get it. Added Andrew Wiley, good. You know, interior protection, but not enough to really move the needle for me on your interior offensive line. And then a bunch of depth beyond that. Players who probably weren't going to get gigs anywhere else except for, you know, I don't know. I don't know if Nick Gates has anything left in the tank, but he's O-line depth. You lose Taylor Heineke.
It wasn't great coming off. I mean, bad injury, came back off that. We'll see. Maybe it takes a little time, but offensive line, they made some changes. It's really tough to say how that's all going to work out as they start to gel as a group. But from a, you know, 10,000 foot view, it looks like you made some changes in offensive line, and it's probably about a neutral. Like,
yeah, that's fair.
I don't, and some of that is just because he can't get much worse. It wasn't great. I don't think we're going to get markedly worse, but it doesn't seem like those are the kind of guys that have huge upside.
Yeah.
So if the offensive line improves a little, kudos, but doesn't feel like there's a big upside to that. And you have some competency at left tackle, at least from a pass pro standpoint, and the rest is kind of rough as you go down the line.
Yeah, offensive line, I have rated 29th. You could have made some moves there, and you didn't. The guys that you let walk away from the team this year, perfectly fine. No one here moves the needle for me whatsoever. The only borderline is Bobby McCain, the safety, was slightly better than replacement. Everybody else on this list was perfectly fine letting them go. And I think 7 or 8 of them are still out of the league. So, it makes sense that you let them walk. They don't have a job in the NFL otherwise. Yeah, you didn't add much. Addition by subtraction with the ownership change. Excited to see what happens with Bieniemy. So I give their overall offseason a B. Would have been an A just on the owner move, but
I feel like we're giving them a really bump changing. Just for the owner stuff. Yeah,
I think you have to.
Bringing in Bieniemy doesn't feel like it has downside.
No.
You could be. Oh my God!
It's downside for him.
Yeah, it's downside for him. For the team, if I'm a team,
no,
that's a great move. Bringing some fresh blood in and seeing if we can get that sapling off the tree and see it bear fruit, because who knows, he could have been a much bigger part of that offensive game plan than we know. It'll be really funny if this team's putting up 30 with like Brissett and the Chiefs starts and struggle. My God, the media would have a heyday with it. That's one of the funnier outcomes.
So you think that there's a realistic chance that Brissett gets the green light because he's outperforming Howell and Cam?
I don't know what they're not really saying so much, but it's just what I would do. I guess you want to see what you get with Howell. You're not paying him much, but I mean, it depends on, I guess, what your overall evaluation of him is based on practice and the little bit you got to see him in a game and how he, preps. They know a lot more about what he's doing behind the scenes than we do. If they have a positive evaluation and they think there's a chance that he's a starting quarterback, I guess you roll him out there for a few games and see what you have. But I mean, it depends what your goals are. Like, do you want to try to compete for a playoff spot in a conference where you could probably compete for a playoff spot if things go well enough to get you to 500 or better?
Yeah.
Or do you want to find out what Sam Howell is? And then if that doesn't go well, tank for a quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I do think they go with him. Like,
okay.
That feels like the move.
I don't see Jacoby Brissett succeeding with an interior line anchored by Chris Paul. I didn't even realize Nick Gates was going to be the starting center. Apparently, Nick.
Well, it's that, or like there's a rookie third or fourth rounder behind him. It's that or a rookie.
Yeah,
it might. Who knows? It might be the
7th rounder Chris Paul, who I have no rating on. Sam Cosmi has been fine, but nothing to really write home about. He's below replacement level, actually, by my ratings. Andrew Wiley is fine tackle. Charles Leno, I have a huge question marks at left tackle. So I think
he doesn't get a good run grade.
No, I think ultimately this offensive line is probably going to prevent you from really getting a good read on Howell.
And that's probably the problem with, Brissett. When he looked okay last year, he was also protected by what?
Really, really good line.
Top 5 offensive line as well the whole year.
Yeah.
The weapons are good, but you're going to have the interior pressure is not going to do him any favors. Yeah. So I think either
Brissett finished top 10 EPA per play?
He was effective when he played.
Yeah, you know what? There's misleading signal in that though, because his starts were all in the better time of the year weather-wise. They're all quarterbacks in weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 have just in general better EPA per play than you're going to have weeks 12 through 17. So a little bit of bias there. But yeah, I mean, this looks like a team that's going to struggle to score out of 7. So, any game that they get more than 17 points on the board, I think they're going to come in and feel pretty damn good. And if Bieniemy really has something special up his sleeve, he's going to catch me by surprise because I think this is a dead nut under bet again with a lot of their matchups that we see on the schedule. So with that, do you have a different grade for them, by the way, off season?
I'm excited to see what we get out of Bieniemy. I don't like you said, I don't fully understand the Brissett thing. Is if Hall fails, like I just let him keep playing. Let's tank then. If he sucks, let's win 2 games. Let's go get Drake May or something. I don't want to win if he's not good. It's like, oh, it's good. Like Brissett came in and led us to 4-4 over the last 8 games to get us to 6-11. Good job, guys. That's not the outcome you're looking for at that point. So
no.
Tank for Caleb. That'd be
really fun. If you were ownership, would you trade some of the pieces that you have that are good at non-premium positions? Or would you stick with for anything like for draft capital in the future? Like, would you tear this thing down to the studs, or are you okay with purgatory-ish D-line being excellent?
You'd have to look a little at the contracts for some of these guys before you can answer a question like that, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay.
Because you have to think like, what is our almost like a startup? What's our runway for this with the wide receiver group we have, with the defensive line group we have?
I think
young in a lot of spots though. I don't think I'd tear it down. I'd look at some veterans that are making more. Chase Young would be gone for sure.
Yeah,
I don't think you'd pay him 20 then, unless he really if he goes out and has 18 sacks, he'd tag his ass for sure. Like, guess what? We get you next year too. And obviously it depends on his performance. But yeah, let's look at the schedule and see just how low we can go.
Yeah,
the Hogettes. One of my favorite whale logos.
Yes,
the Hogette one.
We have a lot of games
off the start.
Yeah, nice week one. Nice week one scheduling quirk. You got the support of the home crowd fired up for the new regime, and you get probably the best matchup of your entire entire schedule right there. Week one, everybody's going to feel great. I'm gonna have sincere thoughts about laying the 6 because I don't know how Arizona's scoring against this particular defensive scheme and the skill position group, and this defensive front 7 is going to be a nightmare to face. The under in that one looks quite high to me. I think it should be more like in the mid 30s.
Push back a little on your green travel spot there too, because team. Diminished because it's week 1. Although their final preseason game is an away game, but it's still like 12 days before they have to travel to Washington. Still, you are traveling cross country and playing on the East Coast right off the bat for a West Coast team who kind of stinks. Yeah, 17-3 Commanders, says Patrick.
That would be awesome.
That
would be awesome.
That feels awful common score.
Yeah, Washington's not a crazy contrarian survivor play in week 1, in my opinion. Because I don't think you're using them the rest of the season. Because as you can see on the schedule, Andy, they're dogs.
and that early start time for Arizona too. That is a 1 p.m. start time for a West Coast team.
Good call. So it's going to be a little bit of a potentially misleading result. Week 1 compared to the rest of the schedule. Week 2, you go at altitude, not a great spot at all, facing a Denver team that has really, really good secondary. Washington might struggle to get to 17 points in that one, surely. Versus Buffalo, somehow, some way, I feel like Buffalo may be favored by more than 4.5 in Washington once we see what happens to Washington and Denver. And then similarly, a nice. This is a really a hell of a way to round out your first quarter. Josh Allen at home and Jalen Hurts on the road. 2 of the best offenses, bang bang, back to back. Really gonna see some wild score lines there.
Considering what that Philly front did in the less so in the game that Washington managed to take, but in that first game against, I think that was a Wentz game. I mean, it was just they were on him. That offensive line did not hold up against the pass rush scheme they threw at him, and it's a little easier after that. But again, those are if you want this, if you're like 1-3, I'm just, as a fan, I'm not sure I want to win those next 2 or 3 games.
Oh man!
At that point, I'm like, fuck this season.
Wentz got sacked 9 times.
Yeah,
that was a wild one. All right.
Right.
Thursday Night Football. You're a favorite right now against the Chicago Bears.
At home,
week 5.
I guess.
Okay, that's your only primetime game of the season. It's at home. It's against Fields. Really interesting matchup because it's strength versus your really good D linemen are going to be running around like maniacs trying to catch Fields, which is kind of a fun thought exercise how that plays out. Yeah, I mean, there's some coin flips on here that I could see you coming away with wins. Atlanta, maybe. Giants, maybe. Sure, why not the Giants? Why not Seattle? Why not New England? Like, if you're going up against a team without a premier, thrower of the football, then you're going to be in those games, I think. And I count. Let me count the games that you are going up against a non-premier passer. Arizona, for sure. We'll say Chicago. We'll say Atlanta. We'll say Giants twice. We'll say New England. We'll say Seattle. And we'll say the Rams. That's about it, Andy. That's only 8 games where you realistically
Seattle,
have a shot. Seattle might be, yeah.
That's a really tough 1, 2, 3 at wide receiver, and if Gino is okay,
that could be a bad one. Yeah. So I think outside of those 8 games, like I kind of think you're drawn dead against the likes of the Dallases of the world, against the likes of the San Franciscos of the world, against the Miamis of the world, against the Phillies of the world, against the Buffaloes of the world. So yeah, you're in a little bit of trouble because I don't think your defense is holding them into the teens, and I think your offense is going to struggle to get into the 20s. So there's a lot of losses on this. It's going to be a rough season for the Hogs.
Well, then just coming off a late bye into 2 road games and then 2 home games against teams that are a lot better than you at the especially at the wide receiver position.
Yeah,
you're going to struggle if these rookies don't take a step forward. So it could be a rough end of the season. My range of outcomes is low.
Yep.
But just because, like I said, what kept him in games last year doesn't feel like that's what Eric Bieniemy wants to put his stamp on. Like, hey, maybe I will run the ball 500-600 times, look bad doing it, and we'll win some close games. Like, that's not how you advance, I don't suppose. It's going to be interesting to see what he puts out there, but it certainly just doesn't feel like it's going to be anything similar to what we saw last year.
God, dude, yeah. Like the personnel is so different than Kansas City. You do not have a good pass blocking unit. You do not have an all-time tight end. You're missing like the 2 key things that really, really, really kind of help Mahomes have a very impossibly high floor. Just don't exist.
Look at those odds.
Yeah. Commies to win the Super Bowl is 65-1. Yeah, right. That feels like it is at a minimum 3 years away, if at all. NFC plus 450. Nope.
No, that's missing a 0.
That can't be. That's missing a 0. 45-1. NFC East 13-1 is probably a pass just because the top of this division is so good. I don't think you're winning enough games in division to warrant any kind of consideration, even at that really, really high price.
Well, just you'd need multiple teams to struggle mightily that have 10 plus win totals, and the Giants not to take any step forward. Like, I'd need like a 20.
Yeah, that sounds fair to me. Not a lot of activity in the win total market betting on or against these guys. Sitting at 6.5, a little juicy to the under. This is about the same price that it was in like early May, April. Like people have just been kind of looking at this one and shrugging and moving on. Nothing that I've seen that suggests the market has strong feelings one way or other about these guys. I don't think there's really any reason to look in any other awards markets or any other.
No, someone brought up
for these guys. What do you think?
Someone brought up the Defensive player of the year for Chase. I don't know if the price is quite there. Yeah, I mean, comeback player of the year is just such a dead market because of Hamlin being in it. Kind of makes you wonder if you should even look at the other prices. Coach of the year, you'd have to win the division. Like at that point, give me an NFC price, I guess. First coach, I have seen Rivera up on the first coach fired, which I don't know if that's what you do as a new ownership. Just come in and rock the boat hard right off the bat, half the season in. It'd have to be going pretty poorly, and I think he garners enough respect to at least work his way through the season and go his separate ways. An amicable split on Black Monday. Yeah, and he has won it twice. And the second time was just due to the year before. I think that was when Cam got injured year, and they won like 2 games.
They're facing a pretty tough schedule of opposing defenses. Do you have any appetite for fewest points scored? Lowest regular season scoring team, Commanders are plus 950.
That's not bad. That's not a bad look. If you had to have something, if you wanted to cheer against the Commanders, I like that better than just playing their under 6.5.
Because like a guy like Howell, if you're a defense scheming for him, you're probably giving him the middle. You're letting him kind of matriculate, and you're really putting the clamps down in the red zone, right? Like, isn't that kind of the general approach you see to kind of untested young quarterbacks like this?
Yeah, don't let him. Well,
give him lots of opportunities to make mistakes on his way down the field, and then just drop the hammer on him in the red zone. Yeah,
disguise coverages. Give him the easy stuff, and then disguise coverages to turn the easy stuff into turnovers.
Yeah, that's kind of how I would expect teams to defend him, which means we're probably not talking about many touchdowns scored here, which makes 9 plus 950. I'm gonna chew on this one. There's a lot of bad teams in the NFL this year, Andy. There's some bad offenses. I don't know if you've caught that whiff going through any of this.
Yeah, but they might have a decent defense to go with it.
Yeah, this team and these guys specifically face a really tough slate of defenses. Actually, all right.
Rivera does like to kick. It's a good call, Sam. Sam, I believe, is a Redskins football team Commanders longtime fan for the and then maybe they can have a fourth name. That we didn't bring that up because it doesn't really affect the betting, but I guess you can bet on it. They've kind of thrown that around, like, yeah, we might change the name one more time.
So I did this exercise because I was curious. I projected who's going to score the most and fewest points just out of curiosity because these markets are taking decent sized bets. I have Washington in a virtual tie with Arizona second for last. So this is a combination of their offense being 31st and their schedule of opposing defenses being better than
12-1 at DraftKings, Dan says.
I might make that.
That's worth a punt.
I think that might be the way to bet these guys.
Might be worth a punt. So yeah, range of outcomes
now.
I mean, just looking back at that schedule, range of outcomes is definitely, a top 5 pick. If you play poorly at the quarterback position, you're going to lose more of those coin flips than you'll win, and you can end up 3-14. Like, you could end up with a very bad record. If we see any bit of, a spark from the Howell Bieniemy tandem, your ceiling is probably where you were last year, maybe a little better. 8-9 wins. That's available, but it's just the schedule's too tough. Considering what like a reasonable ceiling for Sam Howell is. Like, the schedule's just too tough to say, like, hey, if they surprise and the offense is really good and they get more out of him than they ever thought, they're going to win 12 games. Like, it just doesn't really feel realistic considering who they have to play in the division they're in. So
yeah,
somewhere in the 3-9 wins. It feels a little wider
because
they have so many coin flips.
Yeah, that's a very fair way to put it. You win every single coin flip, you're winning 9 games. If this entire experiment goes sideways, you're winning 2 or 3. What in the fuck is going on here?
Are you on Bookmaker?
Yeah. Is your account
I had a DM
totally
from somebody too.
normal?
So yeah, you shouldn't be able to see your balance, your history, or your account balance, or your open bets or anything.
What's
He
going
just
on?
asks- I don't know. Nobody
What's
knows.
going on here, man?
It's probably just some maintenance. Clear your cache. Yeah, betting plan. Not a lot of positive bets to be made here. Some unders throughout the season. If it's a good spot and the number's a little high. If that gets too far and we like a few things match up offensive wise, maybe there's a spot we can buy back and it's an over team for a week or two. But I like fewest points scored at DraftKings. 12-1. Thanks, Dan. That's
Good bet. Good look.
yeah, that's a good little look. So otherwise, HTTR, great fans. Hopefully they get their new stadium figured out.
Yeah, bring it back to the city.
Rename them.
Update
Rename the team
RFK.
one more time.
First football game I ever saw. RFK. First concert I ever went to was at RFK.
They put that sports book in, and they did it like right after football season.
Yeah.
And yes, this place is going to be very busy, and that's a cool feature to have during football season. But man, where that stadium is, it's just not by anything. Like you're not driving out there like I'm going to go hang out at the sports book.
I mean, you drive past it on the freeway going anywhere.
Yeah.
Does that count? No.
So,
all right. Well, yeah, week 1 under. A solid look.
So you'll see any other notes I had on here.
My fingers are crossed that the Commanders' offense looks good enough against the Cardinals' defense that maybe that moves to a 3 in Denver week 2, and then you can bet on the Broncos at a cheap price there. Yeah, especially if the Broncos in any way struggle with the Raiders week 1, then that'll be a nice spot.
The
Broncos.
The 9 sacks definitely added to this too. But whenever we do that with Joe Burrow and we say, "Oh my God, Joe Burrow's been sacked this many times," it's just always this eye-popping number. Maybe it doesn't hit the same when you're saying this guy plus this guy got sacked this many times. But if you added it up, somebody mentioned this in a podcast or a video, it would have been the 3rd most sacks taken by a quarterback if the quarterbacks were all one person. Like for a game. So, I mean, that's the other part about Howell's ceiling, because we don't see a big improvement in this offensive line. And if his sack avoidance, because it is on him as well to work with that, if his sack avoidance sucks, it's going to be a struggle bus as well for this offense.
Yeah, he could have very little time to throw. I know. Terry McLaurin, somebody save this man. All right, let's wrap it. Good commies preview, and let's move up the ladder in the NFC East. Welcome to the deep dive. Andy, ready to talk a little Big Blue?
Yes, this is a really fun one to dig into because
it
was a bit of a roller coaster season. It ended, I mean, the very end obviously wasn't any fun if you're a Giants fan, getting that absolute shit kicked out of you, losing for the 3rd time to a very good Eagles team. I mean, you can't hang your head. A team that probably had a chance to win a Super Bowl. They played some really good ball down the stretch, and it wasn't a great matchup, but I mean, you got there. You got in the playoffs, and we talked about this. I thought about what you said a lot, where we talk about these teams that didn't make the playoffs, and they didn't have that crushing loss. And it's the whole "what have you done for me lately?" What's the last thing we saw? Recency bias can play into itself 8 months later, apparently. It doesn't matter how long it goes. The last thing you saw. And I wonder if some of that, too, is playing into how excited everyone is for the Giants, or was last year. And if you just think back to the last 3 head coaches, because I don't want to say like Brian Daboll wasn't good, but Brian Daboll didn't have to be very good to be very impressive. You know what I mean? Like he's very much above average. He's now, year 2 for me, he's a top 10 head coach.
Well, same with the GM.
Yeah, and Shane has done a great job as well. But it's crazy. Like he could have been like the 18th best head coach, I think we'd have been like, fuck yeah, this guy
All right.
gets it. Like this, just because the three previous regimes were pretty effing rough. Would we?
Even a
Gettleman
whiff of
retired.
Even the whiff of
retired.
competency was such a market improvement that it's easy to see.
It just felt like it was all duckies and bunnies because of it was such an improvement over what we saw from a leadership standpoint, from a game planning standpoint, game management. They were able to get some close wins. They were able to sneak into the playoffs. They were able to get a playoff win. That was I watched a bunch of that game again because I brought it up a couple times. Like those two teams were the same team. Like, oh no, like your defenses are bad. Like this could go any variety of ways. It's just basically like don't shoot yourself in the foot on offense. Go score 28 points and then see where you're at from there. So that game was unique, and then obviously real not great matchup against a Philly defense that was really playing well, and obviously the offense did plenty there as well. But yeah, it's successful. I'd say a very successful season.
Oh, without question.
Still just harping back on this team needed to finally hit on a head coach, and it really did feel like they did. Obviously, Kafka was a big part of it as well. And
big call, good call.
The defense wasn't good, but they were good sometimes when it counted.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do.
You go look at some of their third down rates on defense.
Yeah, I do.
They were able to get aggressive and take care of business when it mattered, even though they're kind of a shitty defense in general. Yeah. Offensive line wasn't great. We saw some issues with that, but they worked their way around that, and they had a lot of injury games lost at the wide receiver position, and they still managed. A decent game plan, despite having to kind of adjust on the fly every week. It felt like for what they had available. They lost Bellinger at one point. He mattered. Obviously, they took a big swing at, hey, what if that was what mattered? A good tight end.
Yeah.
And we go get a better tight end. But again, the real question mark is there. That guy's missed like 15 games over the last 2 years as well. So it's kind of a long way to say it's the same team, man, right?
Yeah.
Where's the big improvement that we're going to see?
It's the same team.
Yeah, well, because that's what happens when you get to this. Even putting the commies in that same, they're close to the playoffs, and that you're in that 6 to 10 range. We got to take that next step. For the commies, it's making the playoffs. For the Giants, it's being a competitor in the playoffs. Somebody who could win multiple games. Not super sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think I speak somewhat from the standpoint of the market expectation for this team, which is another final 8 in the standing, final 8 team standing run for the Giants this year would be a surprise. It would be a surprise, even though the NFC's weak. If they are in the second week of the playoffs, they have exceeded expectations again. Brian Daboll comes into the dreaded year 2 of a Giants head coach. Year 2 for Ben McAdoo did not go well. Year 2 for Pat Shurmur did not go well. Year 2 for Joe Judge did not go well. So hopefully Daboll can break that trend. Weird. I didn't know this till just kind of looking at the history of the Giants. Did you know that, McAdoo and Judge both finished higher in the NFC East standings in their first year than Daboll did last year? Because Daboll and the Giants were third in the NFC East. And also, somehow Darius Slayton has been the Giants' leading receiver in 3 of the last 4 years with 700. Basically, he hits 750 yards on the nose like every single year, and that's been good enough.
I went and looked at that too. The wide receiver numbers. A lot of it, just attrition and injury, but at the same time, those aren't bad numbers.
No,
for a number 2.
No, yeah, for number 2,
if you
right?
can get that out of your number 2, like I'd be happy to have Darius Slayton on the roster for the next few years.
Of course, yeah. Which is the big problem, which is you don't have a number 1. And you don't really have a downfield passing game because okay, if you really want to kind of boil 2022, in my opinion, forget about the playoff win. Like, that was gravy. Forget about playoff appearance. That was kind of gravy. What you cared about with your GM and your coach hire was competency, and you got that. Right. The GM did a very nice job. I think negotiating really good draft capital, but not top tier draft capital, but good draft capital. They got some good young players to fill some key needs. And we get to see if those guys develop into anything this year, in year two. I thought from the coach, you got a guy who took a absolutely failing asset in Daniel Jones, a guy you did not extend with the 5th-year option. They turned him into clearly above league average quarterback play. And a ton of that was sort of thinking outside the box in terms of how do we succeed in today's NFL with the skill set that this guy has, right? They didn't come into the situation from the Bills and be like, okay, let's turn him into Josh Allen. Instead, they sort of looked at what was going on and they do with defenses and schemes and tendencies, and they said, okay, let's abandon the deep pass. Let's have him check it down all the live long day. Let's set up bootleg, get him using his legs.
Designed
runs. Like, we can scheme ways to create 5-10 yards at a time. We'll matriculate the ball. He's, we'll coach him up so that he's not a turnover machine every time he gets contact. Because he was, principally like just an absolute a walking fumble. But you saw, I think, if you were a Giants fan and if you were like a personnel evaluator, I think you saw pretty meaningful growth from Daniel Jones's ability to play the quarterback position. And that took you in an interesting set of directions as a franchise, because you make the playoffs, I think, somewhat fortuitously, right? Like 9-7-1 was only good enough to get it done because the NFC is weak. Okay. And your schedule was pretty easy. And you got enough wins to get a playoff game. And you happen to play a really overrated team.
A couple of those the Washington games was a 1-score win and a tie. Those go the other way, and it's the opposite.
Yeah.
There's a lot of scenarios where the Lions are in the playoffs. It was pretty tight between the bottom 4 or 5 teams in the NFL NFC playoffs, and it was a little fortuitous, but they got the close ones done.
They got the close ones done, and hey, you got your team into the playoffs. That's exciting. And honestly, I didn't bet that game either way because I was like, Freeze perfect. I don't really care. And I wish I had Giants in that one. That was a solid bet from Jump Street because the Vikings were easy to scheme against, and Daboll schemed his ass off. And Kafka had something to do with it too, I'm sure. They schemed their ass off in what they asked Daniel Jones to do. And Daniel Jones put together what I think would go down as a top 4 playoff debutante performance at the quarterback position in the last 10 years. Like, typically, if you're in your first playoff start as a QB, Andy, you're peeing your pants a little. Sometimes you're really out there and the game is moving too fast for you. The game did not feel like it was moving too fast for Daniel Jones at all in the playoffs last year. He was a very, very, very solid operator.
And people would point to the
Minnesota
Vikings
game.
Yeah, people would point to that Vikings defense being not good. But I think if you watched it, you can kind of separate that. Like, this defense is not good, and the team, won despite of itself. Like, he looked good.
He looked good. He played well.
He played well. He looked effective. The Vikings defense being bad obviously helped.
It might have been his best game of the season, honestly. Did he have a better game?
There were some good throws, and it was a rough secondary, but good teams take advantage of matchups and win. That's what they do, and especially in the playoffs. And for a coaching staff with very little experience at the levels they were at, and a quarterback who didn't have any experience in the postseason, there, I'd take it.
Yeah.
I'd for sure take that. You're a year ahead of schedule, and you got 2 playoff games for him. So fuck, it's probably a win, despite like you said, being fortuitous.
Yeah. I think that was probably his best game of the season, maybe the best game of his career, and it happened in his playoff debut, which is pretty incredible. So I get seeing the development you personally got out of that player, if you're the regime here, and going into the postseason with a very, very tough decision of, can we get more? Can we continue to develop this player so that we ultimately are, competitive long term with him and as our franchise quarterback? And I don't know that there are many people who would have said emphatically yes to that question. Right? I think in general, people who evaluate the quarterback position, who eat the tape, would tell you he's got a ceiling. And we might have seen close, if not that ceiling last year. But then there's the huge question of, if you're Daboll, if you're Joe Shane, do you let the work you put into that player and developing him as a pro walk out the door and win games for someone else? And that's not as easy an answer. And I think they ultimately decide, okay, we can get him on a second tier quarterback cost. We're not giving him Justin Herbert money here, but we think we can continue to develop him and use the assets, use the money we have, use the cap we have to put players around him to take our team to the next level. And I can at least understand your thinking if this is, if you're the brass in, down at Big Blue headquarters.
We talked about this last year at this time. We said he is going to put him in a tough position.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're kind of saying this was maybe the most likely outcome, because, if this offense is good, he's not going to be great. He doesn't have super, super high upside, but if he's just good enough, they're going to have to pay him, because they opted to not use the option. They're just going to have to pay him something, sign him to, a medium to long-term kind of contract, or decide like, hey, he's bad. And it feels like he was going to land in that middle of the pack range so often. And truthfully, in a lot of stats that matter, he's a top 12 quarterback. So fully agree. Pay him. See if you can keep to developing him, because it's not so easy just to find a top 12 quarterback.
Okay.
You might say like, this is more than we're willing to spend, but what are the odds of us finding someone who can get to this range this quickly on the open market or in the draft, or depending what kind of draft capital you add. There's always the option to trade up. They've had draft picks the last couple of years, high ones. That a lot of other needs to fill. But yeah, I agreed with the move.
So sitting here now, what's the rest of the arc? How does the rest of the arc play out for Daniel Jones and the Giants?
Oh man, somebody brought up Evan Neal. Evan Neal being good this year would be helpful. Doesn't seem super likely. He seemed kind of lost. I was watching some of that Eagles tape. Shitty hand fighting. Like, just kind of got dummied by some good pass rushers, but man, he just got thrown out of position a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
You need the offensive line to step up. And I don't know what the arc is, because so much depends on, does Waller stay healthy? Does some offensive line, you need to see this offense take another step forward. Maybe just having healthy wide receivers for a full year is a big step. If this offense takes another step forward and they can next year address a few spots of the defense, you can make a run at this.
Okay, so
you have enough pieces to do some stepping stones over the next 2-3 years.
Basically, the contract they gave him gives the Giants an out after 2 more seasons. So this season, inevitability. You were going to tag him and pay him pay him tag money, or you were going to sign him. So, and you feel like you're developing something, you keep building. I get it. The next year is it's already built in. Like, we're doing this pod next year. We're previewing the Giants. We're talking about, this is it. This is the actual decision season, this year or never. Because honestly, if it doesn't work out, I don't see it working out this year just because I don't think the team is strong enough, which means I think that you probably are dealing with the perception of a step back this year, even if Jones continues to progress or is even flat, right? I think the team is not winning 9 games, and I think the team is not going to the playoffs. So I think realistically, this team success this year is going to be scrutinized to a degree, and it's going to feel like a step backwards, which means next year's really the year that you got to put pieces around them. If you feel like you've gotten stability at the quarterback position, then you make the swing for the AJ Brown trade that the Eagles did, right? You make the swing to go get the premier wide receiver 1 that's somehow, some way available on the market. If you get stability out of Daniel Jones this year, which is kind of why I think realistically success for the Giants in 2023 entirely comes down to Daniel Jones hitting. Yeah, it comes down to him hitting, like showing a little bit more range. He can do more than just check down and run. He can also, you're unlocking part of the game that they put in the closet last year, which is this deep ball, which used to be fantastic. Shit, the Daniel Dimes nickname was because the guy threw an absolute beautiful 40-yard spiral, and you've completely taken that part of his game away because of the situation of your skill position group and your offensive line. If you can bring some of that back this year, and if he's kind of if he's bottom of the top 10 in EPA per play kind of production, and you think that you can continue to grow if you put some elite pass catchers around him, then I think that this is a successful season for the Giants, even if they only win 6 or 7 games. Am I crazy?
No, it's a funny way to put it because fans won't be happy.
Sure.
The media probably as a whole won't be happy. But if you win 6 games, but Daniel Jones, EPA per play, his success rate, the running continues. He still runs for like 600. I think he had like 700 yards rushing last year, and he didn't play all 17.
Yeah.
If he can get 600 yards rushing, 3,500 yards, a good, efficient touchdown interception ratio, like he's just an efficient passer because we've gotten you some pieces. We've got you an even better tight end that can be, imagine him. Remember Waller like 3 years ago? If he's healthy all year, he's a really important piece to the offense. But like you said, with this schedule, and we'll look at the schedule very soon, it's a rough schedule. They did overperform last year. I think maybe that gets lost because the Vikings are such a goddamn black swan as far as overperforming from record to where they should have been, that people didn't realize, like, hey, normally the team that overperforms the most is about here, and that's where the Giants were. We had the Vikings stealing the spotlight in that. Like, they could win, 5, 6, 7 games, and you could call it a win on the season, just like what you said, if the quarterback takes another step forward.
Yeah.
And honestly, if you're like, hey, Daniel Jones is right there, we've lost a lot of coin flip games because we're playing so many good teams. Like, man, maybe you think about shutting him down at the end of the year.
It's not crazy.
And doing a little mini tank.
Oh, it's not crazy.
We're sitting at like 6 and 8. Like, oh man, wouldn't suck to draft in the top 10 one more time, because this is, like you said, then you make that AJ Brown trade.
Yeah.
Whatever the equivalent of that is, you get a stud wide receiver 1, you get one more pass rush piece, and fuck it, you're in for 2024.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh boy. Okay. You know what doesn't define success one way or the other for you this year in any way, shape, or form? However Zach Barkley performs. Like, I honestly, like, I wish the guy well. I'm glad he took the deal and is playing for the Giants this year, and I hope he kicks ass and gets a nice contract next year. But I really don't. I really didn't get any of the discussion around paying running back.
Another feather in Shane's cap, I believe. That was.
Absolutely.
Oh,
without
you
question.
Ended up with a top 5 running back for just under top 5 money. And we joke too, like, how do you want to make you want to make 15? Be a slot receiver as well. You got to play 2 positions.
Okay. 2 final comments on the 2023 2 campaign for the Giants. They started hot and they finished cold. They were 6-1. They were 7-2 out of the gate, and they came down the home stretch and they were having a tough time winning games. There was a correlation between scoring more than 20 points and winning for them. They won 1 game where they scored 19. It was against Carolina, who scored 16. And they lost 1 game where they scored 20 when they gave up 28 to Dallas. But ultimately, all of the games that they won were kind of in that just get us to 20 type of ballpark. And the defense, for what it's worth, held their own a bunch, but they benefited from the same thing that the Washington defense did last year, which is they did not play very many elite quarterbacks. It was just in general a pretty much a who's who of meh quarterback that they faced last year. They only had to play. I guess they had to play Jalen Hurts 3 times, and he cooked them. Oh no, maybe they didn't play in week 17. I can't remember. Hurts did play in that week 18 game. That was the 17th game of the season. But yeah, Philly picked on you, and that's kind of, and I guess Brian Daboll Coach of the Year award fraud, or did he earn that?
It was tough because there wasn't like a clear, there was good cases for Daboll, Sirianni, and Shanahan. They're all so different. And it's like, hey, you had a lot of fun toys and you really made it work with the young quarterback Sirianni. But like it felt so expected. Like that team was expected to take a step forward. Whereas Giants, they lost a bunch of games down the stretch, barely made the playoffs. But it was such an improvement over the previous regimes. And then the Niners thing. I honestly, I didn't have a ticket on Shanahan. I just had the Sirianni money. But doing it with the quarterbacks he did it with, I thought he deserved more recognition. Granted, hey, you have all these star pieces in your skill position groups to surround these quarterbacks with, but man, that doesn't matter for like 30 coaches in the NFL. Right. It's like if you're down to the Purdy's and the whatevers of the world, like you're just up shit's creek. So it felt like he was always going to get it based on the media did enjoy, especially his first half of the season. Then the fact that they made the playoffs kind of got it there. Even in losing efforts, the Giants were amazing at covering the spread. This team, so good as dogs. They won 10, or they won against the spread 10-3 as dogs, 14-5 over the balance of the season, 4-2 as favorites. 11 games went under, 7 went over, 1 push. It was a very, they were good to the bettors. They were good to the backers. They were consistently underrated, even down the home stretch, even in the playoffs. You could argue that I should have been more like a pick'em than a 3-point spread against the Vikings. And I thank them for losing in, a game where they were happy to be there against the Eagles. That was one of my favorite bets of the postseason, was laying the Philly 7.5 there. Did not make sense, but they were a great back. Boy, oh boy, did they cover and glory. Birdie brings up Pete Carroll too. Pete Carroll, that team wasn't supposed to be very good as well.
That's a good point.
I feel like it's weird giving it to someone who's been in the league.
It's like Tomlin got votes, Peterson got votes.
You get
there was a bunch of weird.
Yeah, you kind of get docked for having previous success. It feels like, which is silly.
Yeah. Okay, so they went into the offseason with one decision that was pretty straightforward, which was you're going to keep Daniel Jones. Just a matter of how you're going to craft a compensation for him that gives you an out in 2 years, and they did that. So that was great work by them. Great work in the Barkley negotiation, getting him out there for the price you did. Good work. A lot of other decisions I'm not as excited about with the way that they're handling this roster. You lose a decent linebacker in Bobby Okereke. I don't know how to pronounce that. Okereke. You lose some decent depth on your D-line with a couple of rotational pieces.
They gained.
They gained. Excuse me. I'm looking at the wrong. Nice addition in Okereke, bringing him from Indianapolis. Nice addition to the depth of your D-line. Excuse me. Nice addition of a bunch of middling wide receiver talent in Paris Campbell, Jamison Crowder, and some of the draft choices. I don't know why they didn't try a little harder at the wide receiver position, I guess.
Paris Campbell was always this upside guy. Like, maybe, and I guess kind of doing it by numbers, but they did try to fill a need with their first round pick. They they tried to fill needs with like all their picks. They did draft for needs. It felt like Banks was, that was one of their bigger needs, is another corner. They needed interior offensive line help. They got the center, John Michael Schmitz. They drafted a wide receiver, good speed, played in the SEC. He has some, you go watch some of those Tennessee games. There's some fun highlights. Like, they did draft for needs, but it's still, they didn't make a splash in the wide receiver market. And I guess I probably agree with you there. I wish I'd have seen a little more, but you locked up your quarterback. You got a good running back for cheap. Like, they've put money, or at least not money, but draft capital into this offensive line. Like, it's a good rebuild. Like, you can't fix everything all at once. So I would have liked to see a little more splash there, but maybe they're kind of feeling the same way. If they're smart and they're good at self-reflection, they say, just like exactly what you said like 10 minutes ago, Drew, why make the A.J. Brown move this year?
Yeah.
Let's make it next year.
Yeah. They bring in, they paid, correctly paid Dexter Lawrence. That guy was your best defensive player. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I like the depth that you've added to the D-line. Ashawn Robinson and Rakeem Nunez Roches are both good players. Azeez Ojulari should take a step forward. Thibodeau should take a step forward. These guys are on that track. They showed you enough. Your linebacking core is reinforced here. You traded a safety for a safety, big whoop. You did not address in any way really the cornerback position through acquisitions. You're just trying to develop your guys, I guess. And Deonte Banks is a little bit of a risky proposition to start as your CB1 as a rookie, particularly considering your scheme is blitz heavy and man coverage heavy. I don't know how this works with this group of cornerbacks. Do you? This looks like trouble.
I think that's going to be a struggle.
Anytime you're not getting home.
I'm with you there. And then kind of Birdie mentioning the upgraded tight end. That is an upgrade too, but Bellinger was tracking to continue his improvement, I think. And I liked him. That was a weird injury. Was that where the fist came like through the face mask and like broke his face?
Oh, that was wild against the Jags.
Wasn't that like an eye socket thing? So he should be back. And they did run a lot of 12 personnel. So that's you put Sack in the backfield and you got two pretty good tight ends. Maybe, Bellinger worked, he worked close, a little kind of outlet shit, easy stuff, final read kind of stuff, and they're both going to be decent enough in this scheme to to open up the run game. Like, I don't know if the focus isn't going to be on having this number one wide receiver, because you don't, like, you're forced to. It sucks. So hopefully they can figure something out with that. But
they have an entire
overall, like, it's a B+, man.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. They have an entire wide receiver room that is number 2s and 3s.
Yeah, and every wide receiver every wide receiver is like a 2.5.
Just a ton of redundancy there. Like, technically, I suppose your game breakers are Sack Barkley and Darren Waller, and don't know if I love having my most important skill position players at the running back and tight end position. That's fine. Offensive line, you didn't do anything really to address the interior other than the drafting of John Michael Schmitz. You lose J.C. Hausner already in camp, so you have no backup centers here. Depth is a huge question mark on the offensive line. Really, the interior of the offensive line looks bad. I got to tell you. But like, this was the mess you inherited in a lot of ways. There was not a great deal of talent in the wide receiver room or the offensive line room when you took over, and you need Evan Neal to solidify at one tackle position while you have figured the other tackle position out in Andrew Thomas. That guy got paid. He deserved it. And yeah, if you have good bookends and your interior guys could learn on the job, then maybe this isn't as bad as it looks on paper. But right now I have their interior offensive line 30th, Offensive line as a whole, 28th. Skill position group as a whole, 21st. Offense as a whole, 22nd. And that is expecting that Daniel Jones gets you into the ballpark of the 11th best quarterback performance this year. I'm still projecting you to have about the 22nd best offense. I'm projecting you to have about the 25th best defense, even though you have a damn decent D-line and pass rush. Your backfield is 30th. And that is really kind of the stumper here for me. I don't really know why.
A lot of similarities with Washington.
Yeah.
You have a better quarterback.
Yeah. And I don't really know what the plan is of pairing Wink Martindale with this type of talent and where it is.
No, and like I said, it worked out enough on third down where, you took the good with the bad, but being aggressive with this kind of secondary can always burn you. And it's surprising that they had such low scoring games at sometimes last year. All things considered.
It is.
It does. It does feel like they should have been a little less lucky on that with some of the some of the boom or bust plays.
Okay, I'm gonna give him a B+ because of the way you handled the quarterback position, who you compensated of your guys that needed to get compensated, and how you did that. I thought was pretty smart. So
instantly one of the best GMs. Like he's just all the moves have been pretty solid so far, considering what he inherited.
Yeah, and I really hope they can save some powder for offensive line upgrade, defensive backfield upgrade, wide receiver upgrade in the next cycle, because that's what you need to then be as good as your divisional rivals, who are a true tier above you in the Cowboys and the Eagles. Let's look at the schedule. I think that's really what it comes down to for me, is it's just the gap between you and the top two teams in your division is still really big, even if things work out.
And it's similar. We're just going to keep doing this. Similar to Washington, you get Arizona early at least. This is a road game, different, but early on in the season, this could go,
could go poorly.
Hurry. Yeah. Could get pear-shaped in a real hurry, because if you don't win that Dallas game, say best case,
people are a little buzzy about the Giants in that game, and I don't get it. Do you? It's price, obviously, but
I mean, getting that price at home, I'd have to look what the current price is.
I think that's fair, though. Like, I think you are, like, on a neutral, you're 5-6 points worse than the Cowboys, and they match up well against you. Their pass rush against your interior offensive line, like those young guys up against what Dan Quinn's going to do from a pass rush standpoint, could be death on a stick for Daniel Jones in week 1. And then similarly, putting the pressure on your, if the Dallas offensive line is good enough to keep Dak upright, they're going to be able to pick apart your weak secondary. I think Dallas is the right side there. I'm surprised people are kind of buzzy Giants, honestly.
There's 4 very tough games, and 3 of them are road games.
Bang. You could say the same thing about the Niners. Yeah. Niners D-line matches up brilliantly against your interior O-line. Miami matches up brilliantly. Buffalo matches up brilliantly. Basically, even Washington, week 7, like Jets, week 8. You have 3 games in your first 9 where you are not going to be overrun with an interior pass rush that could utterly leave your offense dead on arrival. And that is the Vegas game, week 9, the Seattle game, week 4, and the Arizona game, week 2. They do not think it is any more complicated than 3-6 to start, where you're winning those games, where you're not getting overwhelmed in the interior offensive line, and you're losing the other 6. 3-6 start looks pretty straightforward to me.
It's pretty fair. Kind of another late-ish bye, but you end up there, and then you're going to need to win 2 out of 3 going into the bye to even feel like you have a shot at making a late season run. But that late season run features both Philadelphia games. On the road for the second straight week after flying down to the Big Easy. That's the team that will be featured last when we do the NFC South. I don't know how much upside I really see for New Orleans, but that's a team that you're power rated similarly with too. So You better hope the Rams have punted on the season at that point, and that Jordan Love isn't good. That's not a good stretch to try to get the season back with. So
We
I
got
just feel like there's an awful lot of 6 and 7-1 seasons here.
Yeah, we got a outstanding comment in the chat from AJ Donaldson. The worst travel spot on the schedule is pretty clearly week 3, where the Giants would ostensibly be flying home from Arizona and then flying back out to San Francisco for a Thursday night game. That's obviously insane. I think almost certainly they're spending the week in the Bay. Short week.
You head up
Bay.
to Sonoma, get a nice hotel for the guys, practice at Stanford or whatever.
Maybe a decent spot actually for the Giants in that Thursday night game. I don't know. I got to think about that one a little bit more. God, dude, I don't know that I'm going to have the guts to back the Giants to take the points when they're going up against a team that has really good interior pass rush. That's just like an absolute red flashing weakness with this group for whatever reason. And like they weren't good last year and it didn't matter, I guess. So maybe I'm overreacting.
Yeah, I think that's probably, we do this. There's always that one big question to answer. A lot of it has already been focused on how will the Daniel Jones progression continue, but how will his progression progress? But I think, for in-season betting, it really does how is Evan Neal playing? Is Thomas still, getting better? Does he take any sort of step back? How does this interior line look? How are we looking with a rookie center? Seen, it's not Notre Dame or Iowa, but Minnesota's produced some good offensive linemen over the years. But, there's a lot of interior offensive linemen that aren't just edge guys too. I mean, it took Thomas a year. It's a bit of an adjustment, especially when the guards are going to be weak next to you. So it can be a rough interior line. You can see a lot of pressure up the middle, and if that's the case, then I think you just keep going back to the well on teams that are going to be able to do that against them.
Yep.
What kind of odds are we getting on the New York Football Giants this year? 45-1 to win the Super Bowl. I don't know about that.
No. I think the too much of a likelihood that your path, if you get into the playoffs, your path is going to be road. The idea of the variance of that would be required for you to win your division it's a real tough thing to ask, I think. Right? You're talking about injuries to Dak Prescott and Jalen Hurts, if we're being honest.
Yeah, you're probably having to win games. You're probably having to win games in San Francisco and Philly to win the NFC.
Yes.
I think I could parlay those 2 games and get a better price than 22.
You probably could. NFC East 7-1. Again, too much has to go right for you on top of your opponents having, black swan injuries. So that's a pass for me. Make the playoffs. No is already out to -215. Win total is 7.5, juiced under to -114. Yeah, I mean, I get it. This team is not going to win a lot early. The schedule is a lot tougher than last year. Some key weaknesses still at three pretty obvious areas we pointed out. You got a little more depth on an offense. So if you suffer some wide receiver injuries, you got redundancy, but not enough top tier talent to really break games against good defenses. Yeah, this looks like a pretty obvious pass or bet alt unders to me. 6-11 type of season, and you come back with a decent draft pick and make a couple moves, and you're competing next year when everybody's given up on you. That's kind of the goal.
And then also, who knows where Dallas is at in their cycle?
Sure.
It could be we make one move. We go get some corner depth. We had one stud wide receiver. We make the right draft pick. Evan Neal takes a step forward. And it's 2024. It's, Eagles -130, Giants +200 to win the division. And the Chip cheering a chance to kind of get something done, make some noise. Mm-hmm. I'll kind of be cheering for that. I like to see I think maybe long term in the NFL, since I don't really have a team I root for, I cheer for good rebuilds. There's something beautiful about putting together a long term plan and seeing it come to fruition, where it's not just a whole bunch of good luck, where you actually did it right and made it work, and you put together a team that can win at the highest level for a couple, even if it's only for a couple of years. That's a really hard feat. Putting together a team that is in like the top 5 odds to win the Super Bowl preseason for 2-3 years in a row is I think it was this is total nonsense. This maybe Nate Tice said this, but he was talking about the Super Bowl odds, and he said the San Francisco 49ers are top 5 Super Bowl odds right now. They don't even know who the quarterback is for this team. We don't know who the quarterback for this team is, and this is where the odds is like, is there a greater compliment you can give a coach than the respected money of the market saying this is where you still should be priced? Like it kind of made me chuckle. I hadn't thought about that because we're conditioned to not care either who the quarterback is. But yeah, it's I'm cheering for that. I'm cheering for them to win 5 games, but Dimes looks good and they do something fun next year, and we have a really fun 2024 season from Big Blue.
Yeah, I think that's fair. This is going to be a lot. There's going to be some pain this year. The range of outcomes to me, I think, is kind of narrow-ish.
It's like 5 to 8.
Yeah, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, I'm with you.
5, 6, 7, 8.
5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, there's a long tail to the under if Daniel Jones gets hurt, and this is the Trod Taylor show. There's a long tail to the under if the offensive line never gels, and it's just Daniel Jones getting whopped. Daniel Jones, by the way, he's gotten his fumbling total down from 19 to 10 to 7 to 6. He's taken his interception total down from 12 to 10 to 7 to 5. He had in total, I guess, 11 turnovers between picks and fumbles last year, which is, number one, best season of his career with a bullet. Better even than the year he started only 11 games. Turnover variance could flip things on their head real quick for him this year if he's under significant duress up the middle, especially. I think I don't really see an upside with these guys because of how difficult their division is ultimately, and the schedule being so much tougher this year.
And this happens every year. There's going to be a few teams that we don't think can do much that do something. And, last year it was, who would have thought, Smith would take that sort of step. And, even towards the end of the season, it tailed off. But that was a very good offense. It was a tougher team than we thought. This happens every year. And you have to think, what would have to happen? Daniel Jones would have to take a very hard step forward. Even if he'd played all 17 games, he was like a 3,500-yard passer. You need more Cousins, that kind of range, 4,500. It'd have to be a really good connection with some of these new wide receivers, and you'd have to really see a step forward from probably Neal and the rookie corner, Banks. The pass rush just takes it to a whole nother level, although I kind of expect the pass rush to be good. You need it. It's a parlay. A lot of things have to happen for this team to outperform last year. And like you said, I think it is a little bit of maybe a painful step on this rebuild this year.
Yeah, the secondary is rough, man.
If Tyrod gets hurt, I think it's Tommy DeVito. On the roster.
Tommy DeVito? No, he made that name up. I'm just joking. I know he is the third stringer, but I have zero.
You pull up Tommy. If you Google Tommy,
idea.
It's just like when we looked up Mike White and it brought up somebody else.
There's a different Tommy DeVito.
Oh yeah, he was in the Four Seasons.
Oh, okay.
He's a musician. Just lost him a couple of years ago.
Oh boy. Yeah, I mean, that. I don't see a range of outcomes where these guys are scooping a bunch of awards. I don't think. Their best defensive player is Dexter Lawrence. You could have Kayvon Thibodeau break out this year, but I don't think you're talking about getting enough sacks to warrant DPOY consideration there, even though his price is probably super huge. The secondary is going to be just any team that can scheme and block a very good pass rush here is going to get into the 20s pretty comfortably against this Giants team, from what I can tell you. It's a huge clash, huge misfit between personnel and scheme on the defensive side in terms of how you populated this roster. Yeah, so I think the hard truth is the Giants take a meaningful step backwards this year, but that ultimately that's probably a good thing for them going forward.
Yeah, no, I think so. As I've mentioned a couple times, I'm all in on 2024 Giants if we can get the rebuild. Tommy DeVito, Eric Dungy's backup at Syracuse before transferring to Illinois.
Well, how about that?
Real person. Known quarterback school, Illinois. He did go to Don Bosco Prep, so that's something.
Really?
That's an important school. Very good wrestling program. That's probably it. Yeah, the betting plan, like you said, I don't have something strong to rewards. If you really, want to get squirrely, I think that the alt unders, it's just there's not a lot of room there, and they still do have the coin flips in the middle. It feels like they stick pretty close to their range.
Yeah, good enough coaching. Yeah, good enough coaching that I'm not really into that.
I think there is some, as Drew put so eloquently, the middle of the line sucks and could struggle, and there's a lot of good interior pass rushers they're going to go up against, and that might just be a ride that until it fails kind of thing. If we see that to be a problem right off the bat, there's 7-8 spots during the year where it's like, man, if this number is kind of in range, this offense is going to struggle and be able to take this favorite against them again. Like, this is a 4 that should be 6. This is a 6 that should be 8 kind of thing.
Yeah. There are 2 specific matchups over the balance of the season where they are bottom 5. One is their offensive line against the pass rushes they face cumulatively is a mismatch in favor of the defense. That is a top 5. That's going to hurt their offense bigly. Although they found ways to work around it last year with some of the quick changing up the passing game to a quick pass attack. The other area is defensive backfield versus quarterbacks. They are bottom 5. Their backfield versus the opposing quarterbacks cumulatively over the season. So we're talking about a team whose betting identity in a given week is they're going to struggle to handle the pass rush and obvious passing downs, and they're going to be spotting teams' leads because their backfield is exploitable when they're up against. So if you're up against a good quarterback, maybe look for an over. Although if you're up against a good quarterback, we're probably laying points against the Giants, honestly.
No, like the Miami game. If Miami's healthy, that pass rush is working, and Tua's still alive, like you have a distinct advantage in the Waddle and Tyreek versus that secondary. You have a distinct advantage with the entire 5, 6, 7 guys you want to list in that pass rush that should have some success there.
Okay, so I think this is the betting plan. Giants up against a team that has a weak quarterback but good pass rush. You're looking for an under. That's like a Redskin, the good Commanders. The Giants Commanders matchup is obviously that's like an under, right? If you're up against a team that has a good quarterback and a weak pass rush, that's an over, right? You're going to get cooked. You're going to come back in those games. I think up against a team that has a good quarterback and a good pass rush, you are laying points against this team. And I think against a team that has weak quarterback, weak pass rush, like the Cardinals, you're maybe fine laying the points with the Giants. That's probably the only situation where I would lay Giants points. Is that you're going up against a bad quarterback.
You're not going to have a lot of spots where you're going to lay points. Where they're going to give you the ability, unless you're betting an alt.
No, and I don't love them as dogs. They were incredible as dogs last year. I know, I get it. I don't think I'm going to be taking the points with them this year because I just don't see as much opportunity for them to get backdoored. I don't think coming through the back door is going to be as easy as what I'm getting at. Do you agree with that?
I do.
Okay.
Some of that was just variance as well. Like some of the endings.
Yeah,
for
like they had
last year were a little lucky.
they had no business covering on Thanksgiving against the Cowboys. Because that was a game where they closed it to an 8-point margin with the touchdown, like as time expired. Am I remembering that right? They probably should have lost to the Titans in that game where they went for 2. Let's end on this question for you. Daboll got the ball going, kind of won over the locker room, going for 2 in week 1 and beating the Titans. But that was a pretty indefensible decision. So much time left. You're giving the team the ball back, and you're literally like, you must go score a field goal or you will lose, as opposed to, any other type of game state.
It puts their offense and the Titans did drive down and kick like a 45-yarder that they missed. Pushed it. Like it puts the offense in a different position. Like I wasn't sure how to feel about it. I'd like to see some of the, the nerds.
I think it was the wrong decision.
Win probability models.
You had nothing to lose though, and you're trying to win over the locker room, and you're like, if we get this,
it's hard to put in the intangible of like what that did for like the the team believing in you and rallying around you. You can't put that on a spreadsheet. Hey, find me a spreadsheet that measures heart, Drew.
Yeah. Well, the game that measured heart was where you went and beat Green Bay in London as an 8-point dog. You showed up with heart, and Green Bay did not. That was a pretty obvious example. Crazy back-to-back wins against Baltimore and Jacksonville. Yeah, I don't know how they did this last year. I don't understand it.
Well, I mean, go look at the second half of the season.
Yeah, that was
beat a sad sack Colts team and barely got a win versus the Commanders. So, but it did come back to earth quite a bit. But when you start out 6-1, you're gonna make the playoffs an awful lot of times.
Yep, that's how it goes. Okay.
All right, that's pray for me. I got to go home and my 11-year-old watches my 8-year-old during the day, and she's not. She's apparently full Saquon on me here.
Oh,
not happy with her pay rate. When are you coming home? I said, we got to talk about my pay rate. I'm making a PowerPoint, she says. I don't know what I'm in for here. I got to come up with that. It's like a 15-minute drive home. I got to come up with like a number in my head that I'm going to work out from. I mean, she's tragically underpaid, but she doesn't know that. Such is life. That's what I'm dealing with.
She gets a lot of benefits, though.
Yeah, she can just do whatever she wants all day. I mean, don't give her a lot of chores. He basically watches himself.
I love it, man.
Just like make sure the older one, just make sure the younger one doesn't die. That's all. Free room and board, paying for the food. Oh, these are all good points. Oh, I'm going to the negotiating table, guys. So we'll catch you guys on Wednesday to talk about the Cowboys and the Eagles. If you could do me one favor on the way out, hit the thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, please do. That helps a lot as well. Thank you guys. If you have anything we missed or anything you wanted answered, any questions, any thoughts, any conspiracy theories, find us on Twitter. See you guys.
Your daughter in a group chat with other 11-year-olds who have to watch their younger brothers who are underpaid.
I wonder about that.
They might have had they probably had a Zoom where they talked this out.
That's how we base fucking fairy money.